Today is May 19th, 2026, and it is 5:30 p.m. Time for our second special work session of the week. And I will call this meeting to order and invite all those who wish to make public comment on all items to come forward. You can speak about agenda or non-agenda items falling within the scope of the Billings City Council. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move straight into the agenda. Item number 1, I think, is Planning, Community Development, and Code Enforcement.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Very happy to present the Planning and Community Services Department budget this evening to you for fiscal 2027. Our budget, the number overview breakdown is on page 46 of your budget books, and then our budget overview starts on page 314 and goes to 343. So our department is managed by a great professional, experienced, and really passionate trio of managers, and I'll introduce them this evening. We have Tina Hoger, our code enforcement manager, Brenda Beckett, our community development manager, and Anna Vickers, our planning manager, who's here. Will be here shortly or coming soon to the meeting here tonight. So much of what we do is customer service oriented. So we strive and work constantly to provide excellent customer service across all of our divisions. We're so much forward or out facing to the community, and so much of what we do that's a constant effort to both make sure we're providing excellent service and also figuring out ways to continue to improve that on a regular basis as things change, as we do different outreach efforts, as we deal with applications and processing and all of the different elements that we have in place. The council has 4 overarching goals that you adopted a few years ago, and our department is involved in all 4 of those in a variety of ways, and I'll talk about a few different things that we're working on that will illustrate that without going into a lot of detail on these. We also are involved in council initiatives when those come about, and our department is involved in whatever those topics are, if it has to do with the land use planning area or that arena, code enforcement, community development, urban renewal, and other similar types of things. So we're also very much engaged in that process when you all move something forward in the initiative process. So just looking across the fiscal years, a little sort of here we are in the end of fiscal 26, looking out toward fiscal 27 and into fiscal 28. Just want to hit a couple of kind of high points on some of these items, and this is sort of where it sort of fits into your bigger citywide strategic goals and where we're headed on a variety of things. So obviously we were just adopted the Montana Land Use Planning Act here very recently, and that's moving forward. We'll get into a lot of implementation on that in fiscal 27 as we begin to actually run through processes. That'll kick off July 1st. And then we'll be able to get a sense of how those are going to work based on what was approved, based on the processes, the land use plan, and the map. We're in the final stretches of the Heights neighborhood plan and also the West Billings neighborhood plan. And in fact, tonight at 7 o'clock, the West Billings neighborhood plan is there's a meeting out at the at the West End Task Force to review the final draft of that document, and that'll be coming soon back to you and actually to the county commissioners as well for review and adoption, and then the Heights plan is close on its heels. We're continuing to work on SEPTED elements with parks, and actually just had a meeting late last week looking at some opportunities in a couple of parks, and even one coordinating with the fire department on a fire station that's in a park where there's been some vandalism, and trying to look at some SEPTED elements that we could do there to try to discourage some of those types of activities in the area. The art policy that the council adopted is moving along with the seated art committee, and we've actually had 2 projects go through that committee, and we have more that are on the way. We've heard from the Parks Department that there's a couple of other projects that they have coming forward. So that's moving forward, and we'll get a sense of that again later this year on kind of how that has flowed, and you'll start to see some of those projects come to light in the community as they get constructed. CityView, the software for our project management application processing, subdivision, zoning. We went live with that here very recently, worked through a lot of effort to get that into a position where it was ready to go live. It's been out there running. We're still working on some things in the background, absolutely, but some of the decisions we made to kind of slow that down a little bit toward the end were very strategic and wise, it turned out, to really be better off when we got some of that up and going. So that continues to be refined, but I would say that, yeah, we were a lot more comfortable when we got that launched. Looking at 2027, lots of things there. Like I said, big piece of that is implementation of the Montana Land Use Planning Act and actually processing applications. We also will be coming back to you with something that we started last year, the Inner Belt Loop Highway 3 economic study that we actually, the economic development firm that's working with us on the Billings 2045 project, SB Friedman, we were able to launch in with them on an analysis that the council had wanted to move forward, looking at the Skyway Drive, the corridor, and looking at analyzing in more specific detail what type of economic development, commercial activity, and things might be anticipated coming in the future in that area based on development, transportation access, et cetera. So that's another piece that will be coming back to you here later this year. We do have, we've been talking with the county commissioners. They would like to update the county growth policy, which is basically the county version of Billings 2045, but it follows the different statutes that are currently in state law. And so we've had some conversations with them. They're looking at potentially budgeting for that up to $200,000. So we would anticipate, and their budget process trails yours slightly. So later this summer and into early fall is when they would be adopting their budget. If that moves forward as they're discussing, then we would potentially have to do a budget amendment with our city budget to make sure we can include that funding from them into our budget for planning, and then move forward with that process in 2027 as well. Going way out, we're going to continue, and we'll start this in 27, but we're prioritizing and looking at the other neighborhood plans after we get past the Heights neighborhood plan and West End plan. There's quite a few other ones, I believe about 7 or 8 that we will be looking at and coming back to you and visiting on, moving forward with several of those for updates. Some of those are also quite old now from when they were first done in the early to first half of the 2000s. So that's also going to be coming to you as we move forward, and certainly into 2028. And then looking at ongoing operational needs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute in terms of looking out and how we need to continue to look at how we're operating within the department. So getting into the specifics of fiscal 27 and also some future challenges and opportunities. Like we've talked about and you've heard from other departments, everything kind of comes down to the resources and the staffing and the operations, and how do we come up with the resources we need to do some of the things that need to get done and meet the expectations and the demands that we have from the community, from you, from our federal requirements and things with some of our programs. So with that, looking at this slide, one of the first things to note is that in the fiscal 27 budget currently is a commercial code enforcement officer 2. It would be the second one that we have. We have one right now who handles all commercial code enforcement for the entire city, and he does a great job, but he is not able to do everything that the community is expecting, that we're expecting, and at the level that we need to be able to do to be consistent, especially in some of our commercial enforcement activities. But this position would also play an extremely key role in furthering public safety cost savings. And that gets into issues of graffiti mitigation, which we coordinate with the police department. When we have graffiti, we take photos. If there's gang-related graffiti, that goes to their shop. They then coordinate on addressing that and also trying to make sure that we're getting rid of that graffiti across the community. We've cleared out a lot of transient camps. We've actually done 28 of those already this year on various public properties around the city. Getting that type of situation under control also helps with our public safety and the issues of enforcement and dealing with those in those areas. And then also our illicit massage business ordinance, which we continue to work on. We've done 51 inspections of massage businesses, and we've had 12 licenses that we've denied since that took effect about 5 years ago. And then lastly, closures and abatements of nuisance and problem properties. Things like the Colonial, things like the Motel 6s out on the West End that are currently shut down, makes a huge impact for this community on calls for service, emergency service response, fires, because we have some properties where people end up lighting fires and we have arson, so then we've got the fire department involved. So we really work, and this position is really key across that whole spectrum of services and how we help to address those across the community. So this position also, we did have it in the fiscal 26 budget as well. We're moving forward with that, and then when we ran into the citywide financial situation with our $2 million shortfall, it was pulled back from last year, and so we're bringing it forward this year for all those same reasons that I just described. Getting into community development division, so we continue to have a challenge in community development because basically almost the entire budget is funded through the HUD grants that we receive. The local funding we get, and I'll note this in a minute, is for the building rent for the space that they have here on the 4th floor. And so one of the challenges we have is there's expectations, and there have been in the past from the council and the community, of our community development staff getting more engaged in homelessness issues, housing issues, and other things that fall outside of that very kind of narrow HUD program grants that we administer. And so we continue to kind of struggle with looking at options for how we can find other ways to provide local funding to give that flexibility, so staff or additional staff in the future could actually work on some of those other things and not be anchored only to those HUD programs, and keeping that pretty narrow piece of the focus. So that continues to be something that we want to visit with you about and want to look at going forward. We did have a grant tech position that we had proposed in fiscal 26 that did not get approved. We are not proposing it in fiscal 27 because we are still navigating the HUD, the federal funding kind of stability or instability, I guess I'll say. And so we're not confident that doing that right now would necessarily be a good approach until we have a better sense of kind of where things are going at the federal level, because that is the funding that we're relying on, is the federal funding. We do have one vacancy in community development from a retirement late in 2025. We will evaluate whether to fill that position in 27. That was already in our budget, but again, watching kind of how things are going at the federal level and how that looks for our financial situation. Moving into planning, the long range kind of planning resources issue continues to be the big challenge there. The council had a lot of forethought several years ago and allocated $100,000 annually for long range planning, which has been actually totally critical for a lot of the big things that you've seen happen, like the Malupa effort, like the neighborhood plans that we're doing now for future neighborhood plans, and also that economic analysis up on the Skyway Drive corridor. So that's been critical, but big picture, really looking at the countywide planning levy, which I'll show you in a minute, is our major funding source locally for planning, is how do we navigate that in the future to look at increasing that. That's at about 1.34 mils right now. That means that I, at my house, pay $3.48 a year for planning services, which is pretty good. And we would like to, at some point, look at increasing that to be able to be more accommodating and responsive to some of these bigger planning efforts as we go forward. Excuse me. The other piece in terms of planning is looking at our MPO, or excuse me, I'm sorry, I want to switch over to our TIF coordinator. So the council did approve a tax increment finance coordinator position internally for the city for fiscal 27. And we are putting that together to launch that in the new fiscal year. That position will sit in the planning division and will work specifically with the 3 urban renewal district entities to administer the 3 districts. I know that's on the agenda later, so we can talk about that however you want later, but that is something that you'll see in our budget under planning. Lastly, on the department-wide level, we're continuing to look at administrative support. Right now, the way our department's structured, we have the 3 divisions and then me. So I'm in the administrative part of the department. There's nobody else. So I rely on the county, the code enforcement clerk and the planning clerk to sort of help do administrative things, which kind of works, but long-term, we need to look at how we could have an administrative position that would help department-wide instead of sort of cherry picking off of some of the other 2 clerk positions to try to do department-wide administration. Again, that comes back to future funding resources, potentially that county levy, city county planning levy that I mentioned. With that, I'm going to switch into our revenues. So one of the things you'll see on this slide very clearly is that the intergovernmental, which is the federal, by majority, the federal funding is significant for the department, and that's because of all the funding that goes into the community development from the HUD programs, and then also our transportation planning program for the MPO that comes into the planning division. So that's large. Code enforcement is our one general fund division that we have funded by the general fund, and then like I mentioned, there's about $42,000 for the rent and parking for the community development offices here in the building. When you see the taxes up there, that's the countywide planning levy. So when you see that 600,000, 695 number, you're looking at that piece is the majority of that as well. Just to look at this a little bit differently, revenues by the different divisions, by the funds. So you can see code enforcement, obviously that, as I said, is the general fund piece. And then you see community development where we've got a big chunk of that comes in from the federal. And it's actually kind of breaks into a couple different elements with miscellaneous, which is kind of a weird term, but that actually is a whole bunch of those HUD program elements broken down underneath. So you're looking at different pieces that we have to provide for that through community development. So I can talk about that more if you'd like, but anyway, that's why it comes up that way. And then you can see planning has got a mix. We have our MPO funding, we have charges for service where we're doing the applications, processing and things like that, and then a few other pieces there. Switching over to the expense side, basically we're all about delivering services to the public and the property owners and developers and businesses, and so it's people and operations. We have very little capital. Really, it's only vehicles, and for the most part, that falls into the code enforcement piece, where we have a bunch of vehicles for the officers, obviously, to do their work. And so in this, you see the $50,000 in there. Capital outlay is planning for that new code enforcement officer too, for a future vehicle for them for that position. And we do also work with the ERP program and with other departments on our vehicles. We've done some really good switches and stuff with existing and used vehicles to also try to keep those costs down. We did a trade across with a lower purchase from planning to code enforcement with a vehicle, and then we've also worked with the motor pool on another vehicle for code enforcement. So that's the big, if you see capital, that's basically what you're going to see. Everything else is either the operation side or the personnel side. Just give you a picture of our trending for revenues and expenditures in the last 7 years. It's basically tracked pretty closely, you know, a little bit up and down between the two. We're coming into basically a place where we're right, they're kind of matching up right now with our expenses and revenues. Some of that fluctuation also comes about with where we end up with our HUD funding, depending on where that is, and also our federal MPO funding throughout the year. But that gives a pretty good picture of where we are. Some of the revenue decreases that we've seen recently as our MPO allocation has gone down a couple $100,000 because 2 more MPOs came online in the state of Montana in the last couple of years, one in Bozeman and one in Helena. And so we've seen a change there because they're redistributing about the same amount of money to more entities for that. So that's a decrease. We did also reduce our code enforcement abatement budget for this next year, basically trying to really ask for what we think we're going to spend in that area. And so we tried to make a little further reduction there. We potentially, if we had a really big project that came up, we would have to come back to you for a budget amendment. We've talked to administration and finance about that, but we're trying to be as kind of clear as possible on what we anticipate for some of those abatements. A lot of the abatements we do are relatively small dollar amounts, and we do get some money back because we recycle metal and things that are taken out of those abatements. But there's occasion certainly where we could see a much bigger one. Then we'd have to revisit that. But we're trying to keep that where it is. So that's where you see some of the decreases in revenue that we've put in for this next year. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions you may have on the information, and obviously the managers can help as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Wyeth. Mr. Kennedy?
Wyeth, I would like to go back to the slide that has the new positions. On the commercial enforcement, the second FTE, after visiting, knowing there's not enough money right now and looking into the middle part of the year or the fall to look at even trying to fund that position, I will do an amendment to put it off till next year. I just feel that we need to wait and see what happens and where we go in the future. Community development, I want to talk about. The council decided with community development to put more money into the first-time homebuyer program. After going to the board meeting 2 weeks ago, there was a real fear that we couldn't fill the position, or we couldn't find the first-time homebuyers or whatever. The only way I would really look at having another FTE in that department, if someone's trained to go out and work with people on the first-time homebuyer program. I think that's where the council is heading, and I think it should be a person that's going to beat the bushes and go out there and really work it hard for the first-time homebuyer. That's really where we went with that. Is the traffic tech under the MPO, is that paid through by federal dollars?
Councilmember Kennedy, yes, correct. That's a pass through the MDT.
And the TIF coordinator, we really do want to see. We've already talked about that. I think looking at these, probably the TIF coordinator, and if you enhance that program FTE to be doing the first-time homebuyer, I think I could go forward on that. I just have one other question, and that's on community development block grant. And I don't know if you can answer it or Brenda can. How much money is Homefront out there holding up with their projects that we haven't been able to spend out? And how many more years will those dollars be tied up until maybe there's a project or not?
Councilmember Kennedy, I'll let Brenda give you the specifics on the dollar amount, specifically for the LB Lofts project, since we just had you just approved the Sage Towers one a couple of weeks ago. So that one's just in the initial process for the 700,000, but sure. I'll let her talk to the
biggest concern is the one out in the Heights, and that was approved a year and a half, 2 years ago, and it's still sitting. The money is being encumbered. We have no idea when it will ever reach fruition or if it will, but those dollars are, and what was brought up at the board meeting the other night is that those dollars, as long as we are not spending those dollars down, it hurts us. And so I just want to know what the timeline is and if it's going to happen, or if the council needs to take action to pull those dollars back and get them so they're going to be spent somewhere to provide housing.
Thanks, you, Councilmember Kennedy. Before Brenda can talk to you in specific, I'll just recap briefly on the LB Lofts project. So you did receive that report from Homefront and Homeward a couple of weeks ago. We are certainly, there's no slowdown in our activity to find out and continue to press for them on what their status is. And we understand from them a couple of things. These are sort of hard things that we're going to be checking on. First is that they're moving some of those structures off the property before the end of this month. That's one thing that we're checking. And we do have an active code enforcement case that is tied in with that, and we've been in contact with them. So that's one piece. Second of all, our understanding is that they're supposed to find out in June some additional funding through the state that is supposed to help them with that capital stack, their whole investment, to move that forward. So we will also be checking in June to see if that gets approved and what that tells us. And then lastly, our understanding was from them that based on those things occurring, then that they would start construction in the fall. So we have some, I guess, a couple of hard sort of dates, but also some squishy ones that we're going to be continuing to pursue. But I'll let Brenda talk to the actual numbers for you.
What I have a problem with is it was going to be the spring.
Mm-hmm.
It's now going to be the fall.
Mm-hmm.
In the fall, it's going to be in the following spring. And in 28, we're still going to wait for that money to be spent down.
Sure, no, understand your concern. Yeah.
I really do have some concerns.
Mm-hmm.
Honorable Mayor and City Council members, we have $1.545 million allocated to Homefront for that project. And my biggest expenditure worry is that, number one, we did not meet the CDBG expenditure timeline for May 2nd this year, because $145,000 of that is on the CDBG side. So we've missed our deadline there. We cannot miss the deadline for expenditure for CDBG next year, because HUD then has the authority to take back funding that isn't expended on the CDBG side. On the home side, where the $1.4 million is, I need to have by written commitment about $350,000 secured. So this project needs to close by the end of the summer in order for me to feel comfortable recommending holding on to that $1.4 million to be situated with Homefront. If they don't move forward by September, then I need to come back to City Council and ask to back down that funding for me to find other developers to get written agreements lined out. The only reason we have such leeway with the rest of that funding, it's like $350,000 is not a lot when you look at $1.4 million. But because COVID happened, there were a lot of the deadlines that home dollars were tied up in, 3 years to commit, an additional 2 years to expend. All of that was lifted and waived. But the current fiscal year that's coming up, it's not lifted and waived. And so we do now have expenditure and commitment deadlines we have to meet. So that's my timeline.
Just one follow-up with Brenda.
Mm-hmm.
Brenda, are you tracking that Homefront has asked for community development block grant money, has asked the state for funding, has then gone to the tax increment financing district and asked for money over there? So we're funding Homefront from 3 different tax aided areas, and none of these programs have a solid time to start and time to finish. And that's what I have a real tough time with. So I do appreciate that you're going to go after it. If it's not ready to go in September, bring it back to us and we can handle that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Good, Ms. Jasmine-Leiter.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Friday, 2 questions. One, I guess I shouldn't be, but I am struggling to find, just in the budget summary, the changes from the prior year note, were a budget increase of $968,000, and the biggest portion of that is $771,000 in community development, in the community development fund. What is that? I know we don't have $750,000 that just fell out of heaven. Like, where is that coming from? What is that narrative talking about?
I think Brenda will have to answer that, but it has to do, I think, with our HUD, the way the funding is being required.
Right. So HUD has asked over the past couple of years for us to pull forward any funding that is in our budget that's not being utilized. For example, the lead water program that we funded last year, the SEPTED project that was funded last year but didn't start. So any of those funds that could be reallocated, they wanted us to rebudget and put that into both the public budget, the public notices, and the city council's budget, and also any other repayment funding that came in during the fiscal year that also needed to be reallocated, so that all of the funding we have available is now wrapped up into the entire public process. And so we've had that kind of funding before. HUD just didn't require us to pull it all the way through city council and through the public notices before.
So, follow up, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Burns, how prevalent is that? Understanding this is administrative change, policy change. How prevalent is that we're pulling projects into continued years, and is this a process function, or a function of process, or is this a function of projects just not being able to get their funding packaged together, so they're delaying and then not being able to be implemented?
Right. Ever since I've been with the city, so 23 years. So at that time, we had like 5 or 6 years of project funding open. So an organization would apply for funding. They'd only spend 50% of that. They couldn't expend the rest of the funding on the project, or it cost less to pull it together. And then we would reallocate additional funding, or that funding that was left over. So we've done that forever.
Okay. So my second question, this one is for Mr. Friday. The traffic tech position under the MPO, like, help me understand exactly what that is and exactly why that's necessary when we have an engineering department in Public Works here and in Public Works in the county.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Councilmember Aspenlighter, Mayor and Council. So that traffic tech position, which is funded by the MPO and federally and through the state, 100%. It's a position we've had for quite a few years, a couple of decades, I guess now, is specifically tasked with managing our entire traffic count program, which actually is for the county and the city. When we're out there counting, doing the traffic count, both the tubes, the cameras, all that is done by that position. That information is also then the MDT expects that information to be shared back up to them as part of their data collection for the community. And then obviously city engineering uses all that information as well, and county. And actually when county, if it's within the urban area like Lockwood, that position does traffic counts out in that area too for the urban area and for the MPO, the county, or the city. So that's where that ties in, and that's the expectation. And part of the MPO concern, or what we heard from Federal Highways and MDT, was just making sure that position was doing those very specific tasks first and foremost, which is maintaining that entire traffic count system and providing all that information up to MDT and for the whole urbanized area.
So follow up on that. In the traffic stuff, whether it be county public works or city public works, is the bane of my existence. And we're going to talk about, impact fees and that kind of stuff. The way that we're managing all of this data, or not managing it, frankly, is a little head scratching. Has anybody sat down, or have you sat down with the MPO, with county public works, and with city public works, and talked about how all of these traffic studies that are getting submitted to both entities, how any of that data is being managed, where it's being logged, tabulated, collected, managed, how that's all playing together? Because I don't believe that any of it is talking to anything.
Councilmember Aspenlighter, Mayor and Council, I can't tell you, I can't answer that entire question without following up with like our traffic, the engineering, city engineering or county engineering division. Anna's got something to add, so I'll let her add. But I will say that the main task of that position, and certainly if someone comes, like a county or a city request from, like if you guys see something and you request that we go out and do a speed study or a count, then that's where that position is doing that. So the bulk of it is there versus what I think what you're asking is actually the TIS studies that get submitted for a development project that then also are getting reviewed by either the county or the city for that specific project. But I'll let Anna chime in as well. Thanks.
Councilmember Aspenlighter, Mayor and Council, good evening. Sorry that I was a couple minutes late. I will add to what Wyeth has said. One clarifying point really quick was this position has existed. It's existed within Public Works. We are just moving it over to the Planning Division so it lives within the MPO at a request of the MDT who wants to see that as an audit item. The other thing I'll add is there has been internal conversations regarding better utilizing the data. What we would envision for this position is during some of the off season, not so much the summertime, just the roads are better for counts at that point, but you creating a data dashboard and trying to make that available to the consulting community and trying to utilize those traffic impact studies in a little bit better of a way to look forward to that. So that is an internal conversation that we've been having and trying to navigate. I don't have a firm time frame for it.
That's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Hey, Wyeth, just real quick, I'm looking at the budget page 341, and it's got the urban renewal property acquisition. Is that within your department there? Am I correct on that?
Sorry, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council, tell me, you're asking about say it again?
The
please.
urban renewal property acquisition budget?
So I think, yeah, this goes into, this is confusing. So this is actually not related to the 3 urban renewal districts.
Right. No, I understand.
Okay.
It's the old district.
Yes, and it's actually properties on South 27th that were originally acquired and community development was involved in many years ago, and continues to be the kind of holder of those, but it no longer has any attachment to urban renewal, funding or community development funding. So, and we've been trying to sell those for a really long time, but so that's what that is, and it's actually funding where we have to do annual maintenance if we have to shovel snow or cut weeds or whatnot. And Andy can talk to that more, but that's what that is.
Okay, so that's what I thought. That's exactly what it was, and it appears to be saying you're trying to sell it. But when you drive by there, there's no for sale signs. Who's actually handling that property to be sold?
Well, so Councilmember Neese and Mayor and Council, it's part of and I don't know if City and Assistant City Administrator Iflin can chime in here, but it's on our property disposition list. So it's in that process. It hasn't been one that's come, I guess, let me say 2 things. Someone could make an offer right now. It's not required that we do anything else with it, but it also hasn't come through your other disposition process more recently. So
in all the years afterwards, the city has never done a resolution to sell this property. There's never been an approved resolution to sell it like it was we found on Lampman.
Yeah. Councilmember Neese, I don't think there was ever a resolution needed for those properties, if I'm remembering correctly. And now with the change in our policy, we can do a negotiated sale. So the plan is to get them marketed just like we would some of these other properties coming up, but we haven't been actively doing that at this time.
And so if the plan's been to get it marketed and sold all this time, why don't we have for sale signs from our realtor out there?
We just haven't given them the go ahead yet.
Okay. But it's been for sale for what, 10, 15 years? Available?
I mean, I would say yes, except there hasn't been we've had it on the website. We've had conversations with potential buyers in the past through community development, but it hasn't moved forward. Yeah.
But you don't need council permission to put a sign for sale up there, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I would encourage you to talk to realtors to get a sign up so people at least know it's for sale. And Mayor, I have another question for you, if you don't mind. This is actually more for Brenda, if you don't mind. regarding you mentioned the CBDG funds, the $350,000 you missed the deadline on. So I'm concerned, as Councilmember Kennedy stated, and concerned is, you know, they've moved this project deadline often on us, and I'm not real confident in the September or July or June end of June date.
Mhm.
And so, especially since I hear you now saying, well, if they don't start by September, but won't you know by the end of June that they didn't get their funding, and you would make that decision at the end of June to say, no more, we're moving this funding somewhere?
I could. My statement was based on the latest possible time that I would be comfortable waiting for them to get things together before I would move forward. For you know, all of the other pieces to come together, that's kind of outside of my area, but I can watch those things to see if they come together. But right now their timeline is the end of the summer that they will have a closing, and we actually should know 90 days to 2 months in advance of that closing when that was going to happen.
Yeah, I would suggest if you don't hear by the end of June,
Mhm.
then you change course, send them a letter, they're changing course. And do you have a backup plan? Because 1.5 million, maybe it can be very easy. Someone will jump up and grab it and do something, but that's a lot of money because you could probably have to invest a whole lot of other money in it to do it. So what's your backup plan if this doesn't pan out?
Well, everything kind of hinges on the first-time homebuyer program. With the change to go to 20% of purchase price for down payment closing cost assistance, we're hoping that will help us close many more homes. And we already have a full-time staff person dedicated to the first-time homebuyer program, so education can happen in the community somewhat. That person can't spend a lot of time in that program unless we have closings, because the way our funding works, you actually have to have actual closings in order to assign staff time for that to get billed. But at any rate, it would be available for first-time homebuyer program, and we would do an all-call for other developers. We've already had some conversations with other developers to kind of see where they're at. GL Development specifically, who did Mitchell Court and Jackson Court, to see where they're at on their timeline for allocation. They're going to be breaking ground on their next project in June, but they've asked our Community Development Board to help them identify other land in the city and other lots in the city that would be available for development. And my board has actually stepped up and sent them several big parcels and listings that they're interested in developing. So there's some background work going on with GL Development. But, you know, I have to get that under contract in a legal written agreement by September of 2027. So we do have a little time, but I always try to work ahead in advance to try to get
I would
things
encourage you
underway.
to have a backup plan because the way this has been going, I don't think it's going to go.
I have two so far. So
and
Homebuyer
CBD
and GL Development and any other developers that are interested in developing housing.
And on the $350,000 CBDG funds, I think we've used these funds in the Parks Department before in parks that are low income areas.
So CDBG for LB Lofts, it's $145,000 in CDBG,
145.
and the $350,000 I have to have under contract is on the home side, and we can only do housing with that funding.
Okay.
But we also are looking at other SEPTED program funds that we talked about. Terry Park and SEPTED project there because of vandalism that's happening there around the fire station. We've already had a meeting with Parks Department. We need to actually tap in with fire because they weren't able to attend our meeting. But we're also looking at different avenues through infrastructure development to look at CDBG expenditure timelines too. So we have backup plans for our backup plans in several levels.
Okay, I just encourage you to, again, end of June, if they don't get that money deployed in some other areas quickly, so that we don't lose the deadline and then have federal cutting our budget.
I've not lost a dollar for the city of Billings, the CDBG or home, and I'm not going to start now. So,
all right, thank you.
We put a lot of pressure on our board to come up with ideas, and they're actually having another contingency funding planning session next month, and I received 11 new ideas today, so they keep rolling in. So our board's really active.
All right, thank you. And Kevin, would you mind getting us an update on the first meeting in July and what is going on with this project so we can kind of help direct what needs to be done? Thank you.
If I could just add something, Mayor, to the conversation, I think just 2 quick points. One, I think part of what this illustrates, and this has been a challenge that we have with these programs every year, is the more flexibility. So the programs, when you have a little bit wider span of programs that the council has approved and we're able to act on, it makes it easier then to be able to adjust when some of these projects don't go forward the way we think. We can shift and move around. So and when the council made the decision to put a lot more money in just first-time homebuyer and shift away from neighborhood stabilization, that's fine. It does make it potentially, we have to work and figure out how to try to keep expending those funds, because now it's one less program where we can focus some of those resources. And along that line, also just the first-time homebuyer program, I just wanted to mention, Brenda addressed this a little bit. We actually work, aside from the staff member who works on first-time homebuyer specifically, there's the community's home center where we interface with the realtors and the community in terms of looking for, people have to go through a training. You can't just, to be a first-time homebuyer and qualify, you have to go through a whole training first. You don't just show up and get your mortgage. So we interface very closely with that to make sure that we know the people that are getting trained or getting certified or approved, I guess I should say, through that training, so that then they qualify, and then we work with the realtors and the community to figure out where we can find homes, and then people can get into those homes. So it's a challenging process. It's certainly challenging now with the home prices. The increase in the loan ability that we're doing is helpful for that, but it's challenging. So I think that's part of this tug and pull of like, how do we allocate and manage those funds? And we run into a situation where a project doesn't go forward. Yeah, we got to figure out where to move those monies.
Sure.
Thanks.
Quick follow-up on that. So Wyeth, on this training that you're talking about, who's actually doing the training? How often are these trainings happening? Is there ways that we can get, if it's not very often, are there ways to increase the frequency of the trainings to get more of the population certified and ready to home buy?
They're monthly. They're added monthly, and there's also an online forum, and that happens through HRDC, and it's funded through NeighborWorks National and NeighborWorks Montana. So there's a full system for first-time homebuyer education in place. So people can go online and take a class, or they can go to the once a month. I think it's a Saturday training, and I think they have at least once a month, but maybe twice a month. They might have some evening classes too through HRDC.
Excuse me, are you tracking how many are going in these classes and contacting those who have graduated or getting certified so you can let them know of the program?
The first-time homebuyer information is delivered during that training. So we provide them brochures and applications in order for them to present the program during that training.
I'm not sure, maybe I didn't state the question clear enough. Is your department reaching out to the individual, not just that the information has been left after the training and the certificate, but your department actually reaching out to talk to them? The individual you said is working home buyers.
We actually aren't. We don't have any funding to staff like general outreach for first-time homebuyers. For the homebuyers that are calling and applying and having questions, we can respond to those folks. But general follow-up for HRDC classes, we don't have that kind of funding for staffing.
So your program is reactive, not proactive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right,
I wish we had
O'Donnell.
proactive funding. That would be a great thing that Wyeth talks about a lot.
Go ahead, Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you. Wyeth, I'm concerned about this commercial enforcement person. Is that a revenue generating position at all?
Councilmember O'Donnell and Mayor and Council basically no. These positions are not revenue generating directly in the sense that there's we have some fines if we end up going into court or something. That's pretty unusual, and that money goes right back into the general fund. I would say that the way the revenue, if you want to look at a revenue generation with these positions, it's actually the savings that's occurring because they're cleaning up and addressing properties that otherwise would become a problem and require more resources from the city, whether that's public safety or fire or whatnot, to address them. So it's more of mitigating something and catching it up front versus bringing in direct revenue from the position.
So code enforcement, that's not inspecting houses that they're built properly or following code or something else like that. It's all problem abatement.
So Councilmember O'Donnell and Mayor and Council, so yeah, no, it is not the building. We have a whole building division that does building inspection for the building code, for which is what you're talking about for construction. We're enforcing other parts of the city code with these code enforcement officers. So it's everything from the nuisance properties that I talked about to commercial signage, to landscaping, to obstructions in the right of way, vehicles, those types of things. And then we also work with building on when someone doesn't get a permit or their permit has expired. And then we work with building to deal with those issues when a structure is partially finished. So it overlaps, but no, it's not the actual construction structure review.
So you pointed out that there's one officer who does that right now for the whole city. Is that person being swamped? Is it a real problem or just something that is falling behind by a little bit?
Councilmember O'Donnell and Mayor and Council, it's more than falling behind by a little bit. Yeah, we're not able to meet the enforcement like consistency and the areas that we need to be addressing. So what concerns me and also then obviously dealing with some of these more serious issues with some of the nuisance properties and things that take a lot longer to go through the process. It takes a lot of time to do that, especially if we end up at court. But even with some of the commercial code enforcement, we need to be more consistent when we're dealing with commercial properties and enforcing those requirements. And it's difficult when we only have one person. We get situations where somebody will be like, well, how come this didn't happen over here? And it's like, well, we're trying to get to there, but we're dealing with you. So there's some challenges there.
Help me to justify the concerns that Councilmember Kennedy had with the budget difficulties that we have right now, the constraints with the amount of money that this would require. What are the benefits and the liabilities?
Mr. O'Donnell, can you speak into your microphone there?
Oh, I thought I was. Pardon me. Sorry. You need me to repeat?
No, I can. So your question was regarding with the position and the proposing it in this budget and what the impacts are financially, I think, with that. So the way the city administration and finance have approved to include this in the budget is that we actually put it in, but we will not act on it until the city receives its the specific revenues in August or September. And Mr. Zeller can answer that more, speak that better. But basically, when we know what the property tax revenue returns are going to be, then we would decide that we could fill the position. So if it's approved, it'll sit there. We won't act on it until that is determined, and then we would act after that. So that's the way we're working to make sure we're not getting ahead of our skis on that.
One other question, it may be involved in this. I imagine the parking fees, the meters, that comes under code enforcement. Is that correct?
Councilmember O'Donnell and Mayor and Council, no, that's through the parking division. We do write tickets in code enforcement for parking, but that revenue goes again back, doesn't go directly back to the code enforcement budget per se. It goes back to with parking and then to the general fund.
Very good, thank you.
You wanted to clarify something, Mr. Kukosi?
I'll only add if the council later wants to talk about why we think commercial code enforcement helps law enforcement and improves the safety and cleanliness of our community. I don't need to add more unless we want to talk more about that later. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Pittman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First question, just because the lofts seem to be the topic here. Brenda, so one of the matrix you were saying is movement, but I mean, I guess I want to make sure that movement that you see is constructive, that they're actually getting their financing, because they can show you movement. They've got to move some things off the property that's going to cost them money, which is going to expend funds that then they're not going to be able to recoup. Mm-hmm. And then that's going to just kind of start this downward spiral, I think. And it was my understanding that they can't use any of this money to mitigate. So if this whole thing starts hypothetically tanking, what happens with all of those pods that are out there? Is whose responsibility does that become? Because there's not going to be, if this pot of money goes away, then they don't have the resources to remove them. So then who is supposed to do that?
They would be responsible. They're the owner of the building material and they're the owner of the project home front. Yeah. The housing authority.
Okay. So that was the first one. The second one is, I'm just trying to follow this, and it kind of goes off of Councilmember Aspin's letter. The traffic tech MPO, you said, is coming out of Public Works and over into yours, right? But then when I look at Public Works, they're adding a traffic analyst for $175,000. So they didn't decrease any. So the number doesn't show that they decreased. Now they're adding a new one. They're just replacing it. Plus then you're getting a new person on the MPO. Is that correct?
Councilmember Pittman and Mayor and Council, no. So what's happening is the traffic tech position has been existing, and it's the MPO position, and it's been in our MPO for many years, but it's been in the engineering division. So what's happening is that position, same one, is moving from one department to another. It's still funded entirely through the transportation planning program, not local funds. So that continues to be funded the same way, and it just literally physically moves where that position is going to be and how it's going to be overseen. I don't know on the analyst side with Public Works what that would be a different and new position that wouldn't be tied to this.
Follow up. So I guess this would go to the city administration. Is this a new position then that's replacing the position that's moving over to planning?
So Councilmember, let me just, if I may add before Mr. Kukulski speaks. So it's not replacing it. I can tell you that it's not replacing it because the traffic tech position that does all the traffic counts that we're talking about is going to keep doing that and feeding that information to Public Works. And they're still going to say, hey, can we go and do a count here or there? And that position is still going to do that. So it would be different. I'm not familiar with the analyst, but they're not going to be doing the traffic count work for the whole system like this tech is.
Councilmember Pittman, Mayor and Council, I'll just add the little that I know about what's in that job description is at the current spot with the traffic tech living in the engineering division, it had been completing counts as required by the MPO. So planning was transferring funds from planning to the MPO to engineering to cover the cost of that salary. What that position will do in planning is continue to do those counts and then look at how we can better utilize data. The position that engineering is requesting, some of those tasks had actually been covered by the MPO in the traffic tech position as it had been done. So a speed study, anytime that somebody was going out to do a speed study, that's a little bit outside of what the MPO would allow for. But that is what this new position does, is it creates the opportunity for Public Works Division to continue to do speed studies or other traffic studies that might be a little out of MPO or what we can't coordinate. So there's a need necessarily for two different items.
So just as a thought, but it ends up being a new position. If you took it from this department, you took it out of there. So then it is a new position at Public Works.
Councilmember Pittman, Mayor and Council, yes, that's the way I understand it as well.
And if I might,
yeah,
I don't know that it's technically a new FTE as I understand it and see it, as much as it's a repurposing of a vacancy currently. There's multiple vacancies in the city engineering department right now. Now, I would be with you in that I don't think it's necessary, particularly if we actually go into a traffic impact fee system and we get rid of all these stupid traffic studies. We don't need multiple traffic engineers at that point. And so I think we need the clarification that you're asking for.
Right. If you look on page 365, it actually shows it as an additional new position for $175,000. So if you go to 365. So go ahead.
Mayor and Council, Councilmember Pittman, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for either. I will need to, we'll get with Public Works so we can get clarity to answer your question. I don't want to take a stab at it and have it wrong, but clearly we need some clarification on how these two fit together and what it, because we show it as an additional FTE in our proposed budget, I believe.
Right, on page 365.
Yep.
Okay.
All right,
Good catch. Thank you.
Mr. Lindley.
Thanks, Mayor. Anna, this might be for you.
Councilmember Lindley,
Did you
Mayor and
have-
Council, do you mind if I add one other thing? There is a limitation of what we can do with the traffic tech position with the federal funding. So that might also be what's driving the need for the second position. I can't answer any more than I have already, sorry.
So this is somewhat related. We've heard a lot in the last few months about Placer AI. And there are a lot of companies that offer the same sort of geospatial for traffic, like Urban SDK and others. Have we looked into that? Because, I mean, that would prevent us from having to go out and do traffic studies. We'd have real-time data. Have we looked at it? If so, does it just seem like it's out of our price range or?
Can you speak? I can speak to it a little bit. I mean, that we are looking at it. I'll say we don't have any, there's been no decision or anything yet, but I know we've been having some of those conversations and looking at the technology and also even with talking with MDT and stuff about that.
Councilmember Lindley, Mayor and Council, I think this is a great conversation for us to continue having. There are some needs to look at more creative ways to do that. And that's what I'll add.
Anything else? All right, thank you very much. We're good. Aviation and transit. Yes, we're going to take a 5-minute break while you guys set up. What is it?
Not moving. When I press that arrow, nothing's happening.
What the hell?
I think we're ready to get started again.
Giddy up button.
No, side. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yep, there you go.
What page of our books should we turn to?
Yeah. The enterprise fund summary for the airport is on page 111. For Met Transit, it's on page 112. The department budget overview for the airport starts on page 216. And for Met Transit, it starts on 223. We'll go through and we'll do the airport first. Airport 216 is the start. Mayor and Council, Jeff Roach, Director of Aviation and Transit. I'll be talking about the two enterprise funds within our department for the airport and for Met Transit. For the airport, we've accomplished a lot over the last year. I'll touch on a few things. Of course, one of the things that we really were proud of was the addition of the new routes and additional seats in our market last year. We've had some pullback on those this year already due to some FAA safety concerns at some of the hub airports that we operate at, but also impacted by the fuel costs. So some of that seats have pulled back, but we're still above what we were last year in total seats in our market. We also continue to plan for the ongoing air show that we have coming up in August. That's a great community event and a great community support activity that we do as part of the airport. So air service development seems to always be one of the top things that's talked about when it comes to the airport, and of course one of our primary focus areas. We have been, as I mentioned, increasing the number of routes and seats in our market. And so I've highlighted some of those efforts. We're still doing outreach to our passenger and air cargo carriers by going out to air service development conferences and headquarters meetings with our community partners. We're also looking at in-state efforts like the Montana Rendezvous, which this year will be hosted in Bozeman in September, where we'll do the speed dating, where we have 20-minute presentations with the air services. The Rendezvous, we bounce that around to each of the 7 commercial service airport communities. We hosted it 2 years ago. It's Bozeman's turn. We'll get it back 5 years from now as we continue to rotate through our communities. Looking at enplanements and air cargo. So enplanements continue to rise. We exceeded 1 million passengers in the calendar year for the first time in calendar year 2025, which is a significant milestone that we celebrated in December. We're looking at an additional 25,000 enplanements, so about 50,000 additional passengers if we continue on the trajectory we are right now, as long as the fuel price issues and other impacts to the domestic air carriers, those don't continue too long into the future. Air cargo, domestic air cargo continues to decline nationwide. You'll see in 2025, we took a significant hit from 25 to 26 in air cargo, and that was because FedEx lost the UPS mail contract. The U.S. Postal Service contracted their hub network, and they pulled the hub that was here in Billings to Spokane. They did that across the country as a part of their cost-saving efforts. And as part of that, FedEx lost the mail contract. So we saw a drop in about 50% of FedEx's air cargo. However, we do expect to see additional air cargo above what we had in calendar year 26, continuing on into 27, and we'll continue to work with cargo carriers to bring more of the market share here to Billings. Our total operating revenues, we're looking at them minor increase in revenues. Concessions continue to do very well, as do our land and building leases. Our airlines are about going to remain about the same unless we see continuation of an increase in passenger numbers this year. Right now, we're not seeing that, but hopefully as the year goes on and we get into the busy summer season, we'll continue to see an increase in the number of passengers. But we are still doing very well, operating revenues at $14.4 million. I mentioned our concessions. Here's a breakdown of our total concessions revenue. Continuing to see food and beverage and gift shop in particular breaking records every month over the previous year. Our concessionaire is doing a great job at continuing to improve their products and provide additional opportunities for passengers to partake in those concessions. Non-operating revenue has gone down in 26 and 27, but that was primarily because we were riding the wave of the additional bill and ARPA funds coming out of COVID. Those are no longer available, and so we don't have those funding sources available to us any longer. Airport operating expenses. A minor increase in the budgeted airport operating expenses, largely due to personnel costs. About 60% of our costs are in personnel. And so we see a minor increase in personnel costs across the board. You'll see our airport police has a bit of a bump in their costs this year, and that's primarily because we're retrofitting their firearms that they're using. We're upgrading to a more modern firearm that our officers are more comfortable using. And we're also replacing their body armor in FY27. So operating revenues were $14.4 million, operating expenses 11.1. The remainder of those funds will roll into our capital funding. So this is where we see our capital funds come from the grants and our other federal eligible revenue sources. Passenger facility charges are tax on each ticket for an enplaned passenger. Customer facility charges are rental car. So each rental car operation, there's a small fee associated with that for our capital program. So this is what projects we have that are being covered by grants in the coming year. The ticket counter construction project will begin about June 15th. We'll see that project kick off. So we have a significant amount of construction costs in 2027. Stormwater Pond E improvements, we received $1.5 million in congressionally designated funding. That is what used to be called earmarks. So we received $1.5 million in federal funds for that project. The bid that came, apparent low bid that came in for that project was actually about a fourth of that cost. It was extremely good. Much of the work is site work, and we had a very good low bid, so less than $500,000. So we won't be using all of that funding. The other projects you can see there. Here are a list of our airport revenue funded projects. These are projects, funds from the revenue from the airport that we generate ourselves through all of our revenue generating sources. Long list of projects. Most of them are fairly minor, but we do have a few in there. We do include our PFC and grant projects in there because we have match associated with those projects that we have to pay for out of airport generated revenue. So we're looking at our total airport budget, total revenue, both operating and capital, is at 25.8 million. We're proposing 30.4 million in total expenditure. As I mentioned, we have more than enough operating revenue to cover our operating expense. What we will do is the cash decrease will be capital project funding that we'll take out of our capital reserve. So no issues associated with our funding availability. We did increase some of our rates, so we wanted to mention that. We had presented this as part of our FY26 budget, so just reiterating the fact that we did increase slightly to keep up with costs associated with operating the airport. We are still well within the range of comparable airports within our region for these costs. And then just a look at the future, what some of the additional costs may be out in the next few years that we're looking at. We're wrapping up our airport master plan. We have our next airport master plan public meeting on June 18th. That'll be the opportunity for the public to look at the final draft alternatives and comment on those draft alternatives. After the June 18th meeting, which is going to be held at the airport in the afternoon, those comments that we get will be taken into consideration as we finalize the airport master plan and we present that product to the FAA in the early fall of this year. So we will see additional projects that we will incorporate into our CIP out of that airport master plan for future capital project years. And with that, I'll take any questions on the airport before we jump into Met Transit.
All right, Mr. Boyette and Mr. Kennedy,
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. O'Donnell and Mr. Pittman.
Jeff, I park in the parking lot over here, their parking building, and I see a lot more vehicles there. And there's been advertising on TV about ride and whatever it is. How does that affect you at all, or does it help you, or does it hurt you?
It doesn't hurt us, Councilmember Boyette and Mayor and Council. We do see some people taking advantage of that, and those may be people that would normally get a ride from a family member or use some other way to get to the airport. But we're not seeing any significant decrease in our parking numbers this year. It's about even with what we expect from the passenger numbers that we have. So it is a opportunity for people to take advantage of covered parking until we can get a parking structure in our airport master plan. It has to be in the master plan. Then we have to secure financing, get through the design and engineering, and then go to construction. So probably looking at 2028, 2029 before we're ready to go to construction for a parking structure. This year, we're going to be building one of those projects that you saw up there was a shuttle parking lot. So we have to also build a shuttle parking lot so that when we build the parking structure in what is currently long-term parking, we're going to lose those spots while that construction is going on. So we have to have this shuttle parking lot available, and our parking concessionaire will operate that shuttle to that lot and back and forth to the terminal.
Mr. Kennedy.
Thanks for telling us, Jeff, where we're going to be with the parking structure and what the process is. I see that you're looking at the ticket counter and inline baggage system construction. The biggest complaint that we hear is people wait forever and a day to get their luggage. Is something happening with that so they don't wait half an hour, 45 minutes to get their luggage?
Councilmember Kennedy, Mayor and Council, that is strictly an airline issue associated with their staffing and their operation at the airport. We have more than enough capacity for baggage claim with our 2 carousels that currently operate. Most of the time, only one of those is in operation because our flights are spread out enough that only one is in operation. It's entirely up to the air carrier to get those bags from their aircraft to those baggage carousels. And nothing that the airport does is limiting that.
Thank you.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you. I was also concerned about that parking structure. Recently, a couple of months ago, I had to be gone for about a week from the city. I had to park almost at your administration building. I mean, way the heck out there. And it's a long way to carry a suitcase along the way. So I'm glad that something's happening, but things are going to get worse until they get better. In 28, you say that, how are you going to manage that in the meantime? There isn't that much land out there, is there?
So we have overflow parking, which is where you were discussing.
Yes.
And when that overflow parking is heavily utilized, we bring on a shuttle operation. Our parking concessionaire operates a shuttle during the periods when those parking lots are filling up. But the actual shuttle parking lot that I was talking about that we're constructing is out by the water tower. It's actually much further out. And we are very space constrained on the south side of the airport. And so we have to go further east or further west for any development on the south side. That's why we have in our contract with our parking concessionaire, we have a parking shuttle operation outlined for when we build that 300 space parking lot.
One more question. So with the as you mentioned, the cost of fuel rising, and with airlines having to increase fares, with the dissolution of Spirit on there, do you foresee any contraction of air travel in the future? What does it look like? Are your projections going to continue up, or are they going to be affected by any of these factors?
So we based, I'm sorry, Councilmember O'Donnell, Mayor and Council, we based our projections on the numbers that we saw last year, plus what our air service development consultant provided us information-wise about the industry as a whole for domestic air travel. Some of that has contracted since we projected those numbers. However, we're still above what we saw last year for numbers, and we're getting mixed messages. We're hearing from travel agents that travel bookings during certain periods this summer are higher than they were last year. We're hearing from the air carriers that they're not seeing as large a percentage of the seats being bought early. So normally you would see seats being purchased 60, 90, 120 days out for summer travel. And the air carriers are telling us people just aren't buying that far out. They're waiting to see what kind of prices impacts there are. And so we may see more people that travel by ground vehicle or surface vehicle rather than fly if those costs continue to climb for airfares. Again, I wish I had a crystal ball, but we're basing it on the best information that we have available to us. Right now, we're seeing our numbers slightly above what we saw last year for the first 4 months in 2026, but that percentage continues to get smaller and smaller as we approach the summer season. When I look at the statewide numbers, it's happening to every airport is experiencing those same declines in growth that over what they saw last year.
Thank you.
Mr. Pittman.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. First question is kind of a multitask. As a member of the Legislative Committee now, and as a former board member for you, and this is probably a message for all the department heads. When we hear of congressional delegations coming to town or things like that, if you could let us know. We had just a casual encounter where I got wind that Representative Downing was going to be in town, and we gave him a tour of the airport, which really facilitated him getting us
$1.5 million.
$1.5 million. And it was a tour of the airport and saying, here's some of our needs and what we're really needing help with. And it was very productive. So whether it's any department or just getting in touch with the legislative committee to help facilitate these meetings, they are productive and they can help us. And anything we can get on that level really does help all of us and our budgets. My second one is something I've mentioned to you for 2 years, and you probably knew it was coming. But I continue to bring up the issue of human remains being shipped out of Billings. For the council that doesn't know, as a mortician, this is kind of a personal thing for me. But with the airport, the airlines will receive human remains, but they won't ship them out of Billings. So the funeral homes in Montana have to drive either to Denver or Salt Lake to ship out human remains. And so I encourage you to continue finding ways to make that happen. It's an incredible burden to families and it's a huge expense. But whatever we can do to help you with that, and same thing with the legislative committee there, if there's anything we can do, reaching out to the airlines. And so that was just more of a comment, but I think every meeting we've ever had, I've brought it up to you. So I didn't want you to feel left out today.
And we're continuing to discuss that every opportunity we get with the carriers. One of the things I will add is we are seeing, and this is related to fuel costs, we are seeing air carriers are continuing to upgauge the aircraft that are operating at our airport. So we're seeing more mainline aircraft and fewer of the regional jet aircraft. And that provides an opportunity for carriers to look at things like human remains transport and belly cargo and other things that they couldn't carry on a regional jet.
I just have one more. When I was on the board, we had talked about increasing incrementally the fuel surcharge. Is that what it was? Are we still doing that instead of, we had waited like 15 years before we increased that? Do you have a program for that still?
We did increase, Councilmember Pittman, Mayor and Council, we did increase the fuel surcharge from 8 cents to 10 cents a gallon last year. We'll look at that again in fiscal year 28. We're trying to make, as you mentioned, we're trying to make small incremental changes rather than having to make large changes that would significantly shock the system. So we're trying to make small incremental changes to all of our costs across the board, whether it be parking rates, fuel surcharges, land leases, any of those. We try to make smaller incremental changes so there's not a significant impact at any one time.
Thank you.
Ms. Aguirre, then Mr. Neese.
Yes, I just was curious, do you anticipate any changes in the popularity of going to Bozeman to fly out versus Billings?
Councilmember Gary, Mayor and Council, we see that we have a leakage of about 11% of our what's considered to be our catchment area, which is about 650,000 people. Most of those are on the western side of Billings. You know, they're out by Livingston and Big Timber, people who really have a beneficial choice of going Bozeman or Billings. But right now, we're not seeing any change to that leakage percentage, and I don't anticipate that we will unless something significant changes. Bozeman is going to be going through a construction project that they're getting ready to kick off. And so we probably will see some benefit from that, as we are with Kalispell this year. Kalispell, their runway is going to be shut down for a month, the month of July. So we'll be getting an additional Alaska Airlines flight for the month of July because the aircraft can't be used at Kalispell while that runway is shut down. So I think that will remain the same unless something significant changes.
Just a quick, is that primarily because of the cost of the ticket that the airlines charge?
So you can find good deals at Bozeman. You can find good deals at Billings. People have a tendency to like nonstop flights. Bozeman offers more nonstop flights because they've had support for those nonstop flights to markets that we do not have direct flights to. And so that's where we'll see some of those leakage. When our air service consultant did the last ticket price survey and compared Billings with Bozeman, we were only at $27 difference in average ticket fare. So it's a very small number. It's not worth driving.
Thank you, Mayor. I always ask this question too when it comes up. I mean, where do we rank compared to the airports, both in passenger planements and cargo? Because it's kind of shocking to see the cargo drop so much, because that's where we always really shined, and no one's been near us. But I'm assuming, did it drop everywhere or just here in Billings because we were the largest receiver?
So, Councilmember Neese, Mayor, and Council, we saw the most significant hit because we were the hub for this region for the U.S. Postal Service. So we saw the most significant decrease in cargo because of that contract, the loss of that contract. However, our closest competitor, which air cargo airport in the state, and the only one that reports any air cargo other than Billings, is Great Falls, and they were less than a third of our air cargo. So we will still be the busiest air cargo airport in the state of Montana, even with the loss of that UPS contract. When it comes to our position in the state for passenger numbers, we, in calendar year 2025, we were still the fourth busiest. We were about 40,000 total passengers below Missoula, roughly 100,000 passengers below Kalispell. The first 4 months of this year, we have actually exceeded both Missoula and Kalispell's numbers. But their peaks are in the summer. So if summer travel returns or is normal this year, they'll surpass us again during the summer. It just depends on how much. So we were very close to Missoula's numbers last year, but we still were ranked fourth passenger-wise in 2025.
Okay, and what is there anything we can do or you're doing to increase the passengers employment?
It was that third slide I showed you, Councilmember Neese, Mayor and Council. The air service development efforts that we're doing, we've added significant numbers of seats to the market. Last year, we had a total of 1.2 million seats in the market. That was 60,000 additional seats during the summer season, plus additional seats throughout the year. Of those 1.2 million seats, we saw just over 1 million of those filled in calendar year 25. So we're at about an 80% load factor. That's an average load factor. If we filled those 1.2 million seats at 85 or 90%, we would be getting more flights and more routes into our market. We're providing the seats. The effort that we're doing with our community partners has been successful in getting new routes and more seats into our market. We just got to get more butts in the seats. That's what we say in the industry.
So you mentioned the leakage about 11%. Has that always been an 11% leakage?
It was actually, when I arrived in 2023, it was 13%.
Okay, so we're actually capturing more of those than that. Okay,
larger percentage. Yes.
And Mayor, just another quick thing. I noticed on the both food and gift shop, you're down in revenue. Your estimate for 26 is down. Is there any indication why we're seeing lower food and gift shop spending at the airport?
I think it's a combination of the fact that we expect to see just a minor increase in the number of passengers, and with the additional costs, we expect there may be some decrease in the amount of people taking advantage of that additional spending because of higher ticket costs, because of fuel prices and tariff impacts and other impacts to the domestic air service.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Pittman?
So I just want to follow up on the conversation of why this whole thing, the issue with us in Bozeman goes back decades. And it really comes down to, and you'll probably be able to explain this a little better, but even 10, 15, 20 years ago, airlines wanted us to guarantee a certain amount of seats were being sold. And some communities have assets that'll come in and buy those seats or guarantee the airlines, you'll get this money whether you sell a seat or not. And that was what Bozeman was doing for a while. We don't have that resource, and it actually was a policy we made that we weren't going to be using general fund money to try to guarantee seats to lower the fare so that the airlines could operate here.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Right.
Thank you. Have you received any cooperation or pushback from airlines having to do with increase or decreasing flights for noise abatement or times of the day? Like, what are the frames right now? Is that, can planes go before 6 o'clock in the morning?
Councilmember O'Donnell, Mayor and Council, yes, they can operate 24 hours a day at our airport. We do have noise abatement procedures,
Okay.
which determine where an aircraft makes its turns when it's arriving at the airport and departing from the airport to decrease the amount of overflights of residential areas. So we have certain hours during the day when aircraft are not allowed to make turns to the south from the general aviation runway, as an example, or they're required to extend out more than 2 miles beyond the end of the main runway before they make their turn for commercial service aircraft. So there are noise abatement procedures that are followed. There are no issues associated with those regarding impacts to commercial service activity at this time.
Well, and I would say that as a resident of Ward 5, that we're impacted the least, so I don't really care.
And Mr. Mayor, to that point, can we keep our questions to the actual budget that's being presented? And
That's a good point. I
not try to
apologize.
stray. I mean, we're dragging these 2-hour meetings into 4-hour meetings.
Very good. Well, seeing no more questions, sir, I think we're ready for transit.
Yes, Met Transit. So I'm going to ask Rusty to come up and walk through this with you, being the subject matter expert for all things transit. I'll be here to answer any additional questions that you have.
All right, Mayor, Council, good evening. Happy to present Met Transit's budget for FY27. So just starting off, as a reminder, we run 14 buses and revenue service daily on 13 routes. So we have 15 paratransit vehicles that support paratransit rides to any eligible member that is within city limits. Staff of 68.2 individuals, with Jeff being the 0.2. So some of the achievements that we've seen current year, we ridership growth continued from that 2023 system rehaul. We're working on the final touches of that governance and funding study to guide some future structure and revenue sources. We did grow the advertising program by an additional $25,000 in revenue, exceeding $300,000 total now on that program. Executing a couple capital projects, including our bus wash refurb and some security updates at the transfer centers. And then a little cherry on top of it all, we did go through our 3-year federal review, which resulted in only 2 findings from the feds within 23 comprehensive review areas. So pretty good. The previous triennial reviews I've gone through, I think we had around 6 with the first one. I think we're at 3 last time. So we keep decreasing with each review, which is great to see. Challenges are what they pretty much always are. Securing additional sustainable funding sources for our operations as we continue to try and meet the demands of the growing city. Keep operating forward just with pretty much less than optimal staff right now. We really would like to add on at some point a planning and technology specialist, because the technology specialist is the guy that's talking to you right now, and a functional assessment and paratransit specialist, just as the paratransit demand continues to grow. And then, of course, with each and every transportation bill that comes out, we continue to see federal regulation growth and expansion of requirements that are placed upon us. So the big story for Met Transit over the last couple of years has been our ridership growth. As you can see, year over year, we've experienced significant adoption of the transit system from the populace with that rollout of the 2023 overhauls. So this year, we're still on track for anywhere from 9 to 10% overall growth from the previous year, projected to hit just under 630,000 rides. Ridership total, just of note, for the calendar year did exceed 600,000 rides for the first time since about 2014, 2015. So definitely got people using the system. As far as projected operating budget for this year, now there's a caveat to the screen because this is based off of our 50% projection marks. We were anticipating coming in a little bit under budget on the projected expenditures. You can see they're on the right side. However, with the recent increases in fuel costs that we've seen, they've been pretty significant. To be honest, we're probably going to be hitting a lot closer to that budgeted mark now. We're just seeing our fuel expenditures are almost doubling what they were prior to the increases that we've seen lately here. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying not to blast you guys out with the microphone, but as far as the FY27 operating budget goes, we do see a pretty significant increase in the expenditure side of things, while revenue is only increasing minimally. I've got the outlined in red there is really the changes from the previous year on each of those sides. So on revenue side, we're seeing some significant increases as far as the local tax and interest categories go, but we are losing a significant amount on the grant side, really in reductions. Pretty much the same thing that the MPO is facing with our 5303 planning funds, reduced because there are additional MPOs now that those funds are spread between. And then we did see a bit of a decrease on the state TransAid funds, which is grant funding to support seniors and individuals with disabilities. As far as the expenditure side goes, salaries and benefits make up the lion's share of where that increase is coming from. However, fuel and tires, we had projected, and I did this last month, so that projection's probably going to be higher than what we're showing here, but about 150,000 additional on the fuel side. Fleet parts, unfortunately, we've seen a significant escalation in inflation on the prices of those parts and availability of those parts. So that's another significant cost increase there. Interdepartmental is pretty nominal, and again, that's just what we're paying out for human resources, IT, legal departments, and so forth. And then liability insurance went up. As far as our actual controllable costs, we were able to reduce those on the other O&M category there by about a little under 72,000, really with some strategic cuts to some of our training and marketing programs. So overall, that just shows the different breakdowns of the divisions within our budget, seeing the increases. Primarily the increase again there that you're seeing is on that fleet side, really with those parts and fuel expenditures coming in. So right now, as far as overall operating revenues go, we're looking about 8.2 million, operating expenditures at 8.7. So we're looking at a net position of negative 481,000 that we'll be pulling out of our reserve accounts for operations this year. And then just a little bit of background on kind of how we've got to a point with our reduction in revenue. There was some reprioritization of the entitlement share, which I think you guys had talked about previously. From FY24 forward, there was mills were authorized at less than maximum allowable amount in FY25, which was kind of unforeseeable that would be a permanent change for FY26, just with those legislative changes at the property with the property taxes at the state level. So really, with no growth there, that accounts for about 341,000 of that shortfall, and that's really just on the local side. Again, we did see some reductions on the federal side as far as that goes too. So as far as moving forward in FY27, we do have a number of capital projects budgeted, primarily bus stop improvements, which we're trying to work pretty closely with engineering on to get some of those pads poured. Primarily what we're going to be looking at with the 162 here is going to be additional amenities, shelter improvements, lighting, things such as that. We do have some amenity updates at Seward Park, which includes a public restroom that we'll anticipate putting out there, forklift replacement, and then we have a facility generator that's carried forward from 26, as well as a service window downtown. So overall, we do get pretty good return on our local funds again. We leverage that federal FTA capital grant revenue. So total for those capital projects, we'll be paying out about $230,000 out of capital reserves. So overall budget position, when you take into account both the capital expenditure and the operating shortfall, we're about a $711,000 negative net position that we'll be pulling out of those reserves. So up there, you see the ending working capital, a little caveat with that asterisk there. That is our working capital minus the 17% minimum ops reserve that you see. So I do just want to talk about our reserve fund forecast for a minute here. So at the top there, you see the FY27 projected reserve ending amount. That does not remove the operating minimum that's in there. But really, we do have a pretty good runway here to really figure out what we're going to be doing with the funding moving forward. Really, I just highlighted there in FY30 is really where we need to find some stabilization on our revenues in order to ensure that we continue to have the minimum match that will be required to replace our vehicles. So right now, the lion's share of those vehicles come due in FY33. That's when those buses, the ENC buses that we purchased in 2021, will reach end of usable life. They're 12-year vehicles. So those are going to require about $1.4 million in match. But then again, just to point out, if we don't have federal funding to replace those, total vehicle expenditure that you see down there at the bottom is actually a little over $12.1 million. So finding a way to stabilize those revenues is pretty essential as we move forward. But again, I just wanted to display that we do have a pretty good runway to figure out how to stabilize funding for transit. And then just looking forward to future years, again, obviously we'll be working on completing projects that are identified in the CIP, ERP, TIP. Heights Transfer Center is still within the conversation, but obviously with our current situation with the operating shortfall, we'll probably be looking at submitting applications for competitive funds to support that. Bus stop improvements, facility improvements, and then we do still have that new maintenance facility just floating around. It's kind of a pipe dream right now based on where we're at with funding, but keeping it in mind. Planning activities, you'll see us coming through with the UPWP, the Unified Planning Work Program with the MPO here in the next couple months. We will be updating our 5-year transit development plan. Last time we did that was in 2022. That's the plan that we used to roll out the service overhaul in 2023. And then continue to explore expansion in the wider urbanized area, which we'll be discussing in the governance and funding study findings, which I'll be bringing back to this body as well as the other governing bodies probably in June. We would like to implement additional fixed route service frequency for those underserved areas. And then really we need to discuss, because one of the questions obviously surrounding what are we going to do about the shortfall is some potential revenue solutions. We have identified a number of those in the funding study, including feasibility for a fare increase, CMAQ usage, a potential there, parking districts, some other transport impact fees, things like that. And then, of course, if we're expanding service or whatever's happening in the future, that results in additional personnel requests as well. So that wraps up the transit side, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Boyette?
Thank you, Mayor. Every time you're up here, I always talk about our electric buses.
Yeah.
Is that actually helping us in this environment because of the fuel cost?
Yes, with the additional fuel costs, the electrics are a little more cost effective at this point. We still run into the demand rate issue that we're working with the charging manufacturer on trying to limit because Northwest charges us for the most demand we put on their system over a 15-minute period for the entire month. So whatever window you have where you're using the most power in a 15-minute window, that's the rate you get charged across the month. So the fortunate thing is that we do have a separate meter for those buses away from the facility, so we don't get charged that rate for the facility and everything else. But right now, the increases on diesel are significantly outpacing what we're paying on those electrics.
So you were going to do an analysis for us at some point to say, yes, these are a good idea, the electric, or no, they're not, because we didn't have a bad winter. We must be saving money in that sense.
Yeah, and the maintenance on them is, they're mostly under warranty right now, so we're not really realizing any parts expenditure on them, and really the key maintenance pieces on it are really just brakes, some hydraulic fluid here and there, maybe some coolant. So without so many moving parts, obviously there's not really a lot that goes into the maintenance of them. And I'll be honest with you again, the biggest headache that I have with those vehicles right now is all the software bugs in them. There's so many computers on board that we're chasing software bugs with the engineers all the time on them. So they work, just not as well as I want them to, which can honestly be said about my diesels half the time too. So, yeah.
Ms. Aguirre?
Thank you. On slide 10, I believe, about the capital projects, that line item about the downtown service window,
Yep.
is that the one downstairs?
That's the one, yeah, right across the street here
In the transfer center.
in the transfer center.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Sorry, I was like, how can it cost
Yeah, no, it's just
200,000 to run this window
it's
downstairs?
a small remodel project. We want to put a customer service window there because the majority of our routes come together at the downtown transfer center.
Okay.
Right now, if somebody's trying to submit a paratransit application or needs some sort of customer service, they have to come to Met Transit's location, which we only have an hourly bus that runs past our facility right now. So centrally locating it where all of our routes come together makes a lot more sense.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Thank you. So you said the electric buses have a lifespan of around 12 years.
Yeah, all the heavy duties.
How does that compare to gasoline powered?
They're exactly the same. FTA requires minimum 12 years for a heavy duty bus.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good.
Mhm.
Also, we've seen a lot of pressure on moving annexations west of town.
Mhm.
Is that increasing pressure upon your transit system to extend out further west?
It does on the paratransit side because we operate beyond what we're federally required to. So for ADA service for individuals who can't use the fixed route, that's what our paratransit service is for. Technically, federal requirements only require 3/4 of a mile around a fixed route established line. But since all taxpayers support us, right, in the city of Billings, we serve anywhere there. So we have been seeing an increase in paratransit demand in those far currently. The transit development plan that I mentioned will most likely be looking at how to best start to stretch our fixed route system out into those areas as well so that we're serving more than just the paratransit clients.
And that will have financial.
That will have financial implications, yes.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Urban renewal.
Got it. Yeah, I think so. All right. New slide. Start slideshow. Escape. Come on. Do it. There we go. All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to present to you the Urban Renewal Funds. There are representatives from all three districts here to answer any specific questions. So we'll kick it off here. The City of Billings has kind of what I quantify as 4 urban renewal funds, a downtown revolving loan fund, which you haven't seen much of, and then we have 3 tax increment districts. So our downtown revolving loan fund was established at the extinguishment of the original downtown TIF district, and issues loans to businesses in the district. It's bigger than the TIF district for up to $250,000. This is established by ordinance. It is a revolving fund, so any interest earned stays in there. We haven't had a lot of activity in there lately, largely because the interest rates are just not that favorable right now. I think as interest rates start to drop, this program becomes a little more appealing. We do, however, have budgeted for $800,000 of loans in this program. There's currently about $2 million in cash and $600,000 in outstanding loans, which are all current. Okay, so the East Tax Increment budget is a total budget of $1.7 million, and broken down there, there's some debt service payments, and we have cost allocation charges and charges to planning, and then a portion of that TIF coordinator covered here. All 3 districts pay for those. Then the operating agreement with BirdWorks, formerly eBird, $139,000, and then development projects incentives of $1 million. And over half of those are ones you've already approved, but are likely to come online, be completed, and therefore start to be paid out. So there is a portion budgeted for unanticipated development projects. You'll see that in most of the districts here, and that's just because things will come up during the fiscal year. Those all come to you to be approved individually, but then we're also not bringing a subsequent budget amendment for them as well. That's the idea there. In this district, we have projected 0% tax increase. I think there probably will be some small increase, but it's really challenging to project our TIF district tax revenue because there's a couple of variables there that drive that. Projected ending balance, though, of cash at end of fiscal year 27 is $800,000 if everything were spent and came in as projected. This table I provide every year to show the growth of the district over time. This district was established in 2007. Since then, it has seen 73% taxable value growth relative to the city, which has seen 61% taxable value growth since that same time. All right, the downtown district, a total budget of $3 million. Here again, very similar types of things. You've got $1.2 million in debt payments, charges from the city of Billings for those same. It's cost allocation for finance, admin, planning, and then that TIF coordinator position. Then we have $86,000 for cooperative safety currently in the budget. Katie talked about that last night. This is primarily used to fund the police officer downtown, a portion of the police officer downtown, as well as pay for the railroad crossing maintenance. Is it BNSF now that owns that? Yeah, so formerly Montana Rail Link, there's an agreement, they put in they wouldn't honk as they went through downtown, but they had enhanced signals, and so we have to pay for that. The DBP operating agreement at $258,000, and then development project incentives of $1.3 million. Here again, $1.1 million are projects you've already approved and are at some level of completion and hopefully starting to be paid out. After talking with Katie, I wanted to highlight a couple things that are in that development project incentives amount that are not necessarily development projects you've approved, but programs that you've approved in the past and they intend to continue. That would be the Battle of the Plans program, some funds available for SEPTED, signage grant, and then a facade grant. These are all ones that you guys have approved in the past. They're generally small incentives, $3,000 that don't come to you individually, but they meet the threshold of the parameters that were set out. There is a request that is not included in the proposed budget, and I'm going to just set this out here, and then I think Katie will has interest in discussing it more with you. But the request is to expand the cooperative safety funding and cover about 75% of that program, which includes the security, the outreach program, and the 3 police officers. This would increase to a total cost of $306,000. So that is not currently in the budget, but there is a request to add that in. So for the downtown TIF district, we also projected 0% tax increase. We've done that historically, especially in this district, just as a conservative approach. And the estimated ending cash balance is around $3.5 million for fiscal year 27. Here again, since 2006, this district has seen about 91% growth compared to the city's 69% growth over that same amount of time. All right, and then finally, the South Tax Increment District, a total budget of $15.5 million. The same sort of elements here. There are a couple things though that are unique. This one, the South Park Pool being the major capital project here at $10 million. That would be bond funded, and the plan is to get that going in 2027. I will note that there are $1.5 million budgeted for development project incentives. However, you guys recently approved the South Hills Commons, I believe is the name of that project down there. That is not individually identified in there. So either we'll be using that 1.5 million that's being requested, or we'll be coming back for a budget amendment to add that back in. So just want to point that out. This district estimated revenue of 15 million, 10 of that being from bond proceeds, about 5.5 million in annual tax revenue, and then interest income of around 200,000. Projected ending cash balance here is probably closer to $6 million at end of fiscal 27 if everything were to be spent as budgeted. And then finally, the same chart. This district has seen the largest growth, but it was a lot of farmland, so maybe a little easier for development than the other two districts. But as you've seen, 101% growth in taxable value since its existence in 2008 relative to the city's growth of 52%. This is summary here. It is in your packet, just kind of a side-by-side comparison of each district categorized by classification of revenue and expense type. I guess because you mentioned it, Councilmember Neese, I wanted to highlight it. We do have those properties, the urban renewal properties that Wyeth was talking about on the south side that candidly had been for sale, but have not sold in I don't know how many years. But there's expenses there, and there is no money to pay for those expenses. That'd be plowing, weed abatement, small dollar stuff. We are recommending that a transfer from the South TIF be used to fund those costs. That's the $21,000 transfer that you see at the bottom of the blue column for a transfer out. That is new and I guess different this year from years past, and that's because it now finally captures those properties inside the district. And that's what I have for council discussion, or that's what I have for council presentation on TIF districts or urban renewal districts. But I know that they probably would like to speak and then expand on anything we've discussed. I'll leave it there. Mayor.
Thank you. Tell you what, for purposes of order and maybe brevity, let's take it one fund at a time. So the Downtown Revolving Loan Fund, do we have any questions or do we want to see any further presentations on that? All right, great. Now we'll move to the East Fund, Tax Increment East. Any questions regarding that, or do we have anybody that wants to speak on that? Nope, we're good.
Okay.
All right. Tax Increment North 27th at downtown. Any questions? Mr. Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, on the graph on the downtown, I'm not sure what page it is on your, yeah, there you go. You and I talked about centrally assessed. How would that centrally assessed impact that graph at all if that was netted out?
I don't know how it would impact if it was netted out. I suspect you'd see maybe more smoothing of that line. I did send you a breakdown of the percentage of centrally assessed in each district, and downtown has about, depending on the year, 17 to 20% of their tax base is centrally assessed, which is substantially larger than the other two districts. So yeah, I don't know exactly how that would look without it. I mean, it'd be worth less though, because you would be removing a good portion of their tax base.
I'm just trying to see how it's actually growing, because I think when the 5 years that you sent us, it looked to me like the district grew a couple $100,000 over those 5 years, taking the impact of the centrally assessed out. And so I'm wondering now, I mean, it really looks flat since 2018. It just little spikes up and down based upon the taxable revaluations and then dropping down. But what's the procedure if we say, you know what, this just isn't doing what we need to do? It needs a complete reset, and to end this early and then maybe start a new TIF some other way in another different formation or different areas to actually bring this to work? I mean, what would the process be so that we can capture whatever increment we have and start over again?
Yeah, so I probably would need to do some more research, but you do have debt obligations in this district. You don't have the ability to completely extinguish it. You have development agreements that have been signed, multi-year payouts here that I would say you have an obligation to pay. So you would at least need to see those through, and the debt issuance will go for the full term of the district, another, I don't know.
So there really isn't an
18
outlet
years.
this time. We just have to wait until the debt's paid off, and hopefully it will continue to build and maybe find some additional projects on it.
There is a provision in state law that allows for distribution of excess proceeds to taxing jurisdictions, but that would not be eliminating the district. I mean, you could effectively do that in a district. You pay all your obligations, anything remaining can be distributed out, but your district would still exist as long as the bonds are outstanding.
Okay, thank you. I looking at the cost of this, been well over $300,000 a year for this management of this, and then over 5 years that you had, the net amount was only $200,000. It just doesn't seem like it's working, and maybe I need to take a longer perspective out of it. But it just doesn't seem to be doing. We're putting money out into this, and it's not growing at all. But thank you,
Mr. Lindley.
Thanks, Mayor. Similar question to Councilmember Neese. Beyond the centrally assessed properties that once were taxable and now are government buildings, I assume that if you go back to when they were taxable, that those are showing up on the graph in earlier years. Is that true?
That is true, although I don't think it makes I wouldn't imagine it makes a visible difference on that graph. They're pretty small. I mean, this building was a federal building, and I guess actually I believe the federal buildings are privately owned and then leased, so that may not have been an issue then. But I don't know that it's a major portion of that tax base, to be honest with you, but it could be some of that.
Yeah, my only, I guess, however big it is, if there's a building that is not taxable now, then we shouldn't see it in the earlier parts of the graph. Otherwise, it just completely skews it. Yeah, it might not be that much, but.
Sure.
Dr. Nicholson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. We have Ms. Schreiner up to answer some questions. I think we ask a little more from the downtown district because we're talking about economic development. So that's part of what we spend for your services down there. How many people work downtown?
Mayor and Councilmember Nicholson, I appreciate the opportunity to answer this question. We weren't able to bring that data up last night. We reached out to Big Sky Economic Development. We share some software with them. So we worked with them to look at Jobs EQ, which is a program that pulls employment numbers, employment data. It really depends on the map that you capture and what you would consider employment downtown. If you look at the core of downtown, the Central Business District, we have about 45,000 employees that come into our district every single day, annually working downtown. If you extend that out, you can go up as high as some of the reports showed 70,000 if you pull in hospital districts, university districts, being adjacent to downtown. So it's a significant number. We use a number that 27% of Yellowstone County does work downtown.
So it's fair to say that Ward 1 really is the beating heart of Billings.
Well, thank you.
Tell me about the growth of business downtown.
I might rely on Mehmet, our economic development director. He is really the ones with boots on the ground putting that effort into it, and he's put a lot of thought into being able to provide very accurate data and very good anecdotal evidence.
Mayor and Councilmember Nicholson, yeah, I'm happy to answer. Do you have like a specific area you'd like to focus on?
Tell me about how the trajectory of growth of businesses downtown has been.
Pretty healthy. Historically, for the past 7 years, we've seen anywhere from in terms of new businesses that are moving into the downtown area, we've seen anywhere from as few as 21 a year to as many as 35 new businesses a year.
Is it slowing down at all?
Not, I mean, specifically, actually, this year and last year, it's been very steady, and this year more so than last year. But it's been always at an upward trajectory.
How many?
Of
absolute numbers.
new,
How many storefronts?
so, oof. But I mean, yeah, like we've used those numbers in the past. You know, when I first started, we've identified about over 100 empty storefronts. We at the time, this was back in 2019. We were working very closely with council. Council was getting a lot of tours of the downtown vacancies to say, what are we doing about this? And since then, we've reduced that by 80%, and we're under 20 now with all the recent activations and openings of the businesses that you keep seeing downtown.
And this includes businesses south of the railroad tracks?
South of the railroad tracks is pretty steady for the most part, with the exclusion maybe of there's like about a segment on Minnesota Avenue between 27th and 28th where there's a property that we're heavily targeting to identify a potential investor to take over. But for the most part of it is all occupied, to our knowledge, and operational in one capacity or another.
I see you lost undammed distilling. Is that space filled up?
They're actually, initially they were, in their first place, they were already in the eBird on the very edge, and then they moved further into the eBird. Okay. And then in their previous space, it's been now a new business moved in called Quill House of Ink. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the tax increment north downtown graph. So, current taxable value of $7.8 million. On my property tax bill for my building, that's a smaller number, correct?
Yes, the taxable value is a smaller number.
So we got a $50 million or $40 million construction project going on. What would a relative, just stick your finger to the wind, taxable value, something like that be?
I'm going to stick my finger to a calculator really quick. Gosh, what is it? Okay, I'm going to give you probably not a very good number, but well, they changed the tax
Heard
rates.
that.
They changed the tax structures. I would guess that a $50 million building, I'm going to guess, is around $600,000 of taxable value.
Okay, and that would be offset by the county building that just went off the rolls. What relative value would that be?
I don't know.
Less than 600,000, right?
Quite a bit less, yeah. I mean, I would imagine that building was worth 10% of a $50 million hotel.
So if we were to look at, your graph up there, that big spike around 15, would that be the Northern and the Stockman Bank building?
It would
be a combination of those two.
It'd be a combination of that, as well as the last time there was major property tax structure change in Montana was in 2015. That resulted in some valuation increases just across the state as well. So I think it's probably a combination of many factors, but definitely those two.
Okay, we're doing a project right now with the Masonic Temple, that rehab. What effect would that have on this graph?
It would be positive. The value of commercial properties in Montana are largely based on an income basis, and so I don't know, but if it's becoming more marketable for higher class office, or I'm not sure what they're doing there, to be honest with you, but it should be worth more on an income basis.
So to make the biggest impact on that black line, though, we need something big built downtown. Is that the right assumption?
I think so, yeah.
Got any money?
$23 or something in my pocket.
Good for a down payment. Come see me later.
On what?
I don't know, but we're going to buy some property.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Mr. Kukulski.
I wish I could put a number to it. The outfit out of Asheville, North Carolina, I forget their name. They've done a lot of data research downtown. I would say, point out to me a community in this country. Real estate is all about location, location, location. You point out to me a community where real estate values are high, that its downtown is struggling. I don't think you're going to find very many of them. There's an absolute correlation between the strength and health of a core downtown and how valuable the property is across the rest of the city. Whether it's a town of 1,000 people or a town of 100,000 people, I think you very consistently, I'd challenge anybody, data, information to look into that. I bet you would find a strong, strong connection between those, to the point of how important it is to focus on a downtown or walk away from a downtown and feel the effects economically across the entire city. Thanks.
I have one more question for downtown folks, if that's okay with everybody. Can you give us an idea of your pipeline for projects that would impact this black line?
Mayor and Council and Mayor Nelson, yes. So, I was hoping to chime in a little bit. I would agree to the sentiment that any and all properties that you see that are that it's an existing structure that gets rehabbed, for example, like the Masonic Temple, you will see positive activity on it. However, because it's a well-established property and a lot of these properties are well appreciated, you may not notice that on that line. Where you're going to see the most bang for your buck and impact is anytime you're converting what we call in the urban settings missing teeth. So whether that's an empty lot or a parking lot, and then you're going vertical with it, you will see the impact of that. In fact, a very good case study that we can look at is the parking garage next door to this building. It's just a simple parking garage, not even retail at the ground level, which that would enhance the quality of it if it were there. But just by simply going into vertical growth, is then you're taxing multiple floors. And so in a downtown district, and to your point about being downtown urban cores where they generate more value, if you look at the value per acre model, that is very accurate and proven since the 1920s.
So can you get to the pipeline?
I'm sorry?
What kind of pipeline do you guys have for impactful construction or development projects that would?
We have about, I want to say off the top of my head, about 7 projects that we're working on closely and diligently. But as you all know, at the end of the day, we have to convince the property owners to get it across the finish line and to commit. And then they all have to look at the capital stack that they have to put together. Because oftentimes, TIF is just one tool of the whole package.
Correct. So 7. Mm-hmm. One more question. I'm sorry for Mr. Zeller, sir. So we had the property tax restructuring last year that put a larger burden on commercial. I know that in my building's values, I know my building's taxes were increased in the mid-30s. So if you were to draw this line with that in mind, would that cause a 30% increase in that and where that black line is?
I apologize. I don't follow the question.
Property tax was restructured to take the burden from residential to commercial.
Right.
So my commercial property went up mid 30% in my taxes. As I understand it, I saw a big increase in the value. I don't know if it's obviously the taxable value. So is that going to cause a correlating bump on that black line?
So I don't think it did, because what ended up happening with the tax base is if you think about a pie chart, the portion that is residential shrunk proportionately. Therefore, the it wasn't necessarily the value of commercial increased, it was the value of residential decreased. So when we collected $1, more of that came from commercial. So as a proportion of our tax base, commercial makes up a greater percentage than it did the year before. And that's not necessarily because the value of commercial went up. And so actually downtown and east, well, actually downtown went up slightly, I believe, but east actually dropped slightly. And that's just taxable value there. That is not tax revenue.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Anything else for the North 27th District? All right. Pardon me? Okay, so we're going to move to the South District, and Mr. Kennedy's going to start us off with that.
Thank you. I had to wait to get all the way to the south. Andy, on the tax increment for the south, you have development project incentives, 1.5 million. Nothing currently budgeted for the South Hills Common. So the 1.3 million that was allocated, out of that 1.5 million, does that mean we only have 250,000 left in that increment district?
No.
Okay.
The proposed budget originally came to us with unspecified development projects totaling 1.5 million. Between that point in time and today, you guys approved a project of 1.3 million, which likely won't be paid until fiscal 27. And my point there is that project is not specifically identified in the South District. The district generally identifies projects generically because they haven't been specifically approved. Maybe these people don't want it to be public just yet, but it might just be tire shop or something like that. So the district has sufficient cash to increase the budget if that is the intent, or some of those projects that are planned in the 1.5 million originally will have to be delayed till a future year because of the $1.3 million Southville Commons project. I'm trying to pull up the spreadsheet of kind of their generic project categories.
So my concern is if any other new projects come up and they're delayed and we're waiting on this development project that's supposedly getting the 1.3 million, we could delay other projects in the South TIF waiting for the South Hills Commons to do something.
So I don't think that should be a concern of yours. The district has sufficient cash to do budget amendments to increase that. So if another project comes to you, it would require a budget amendment ultimately.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that should be a concern of yours that it will delay
That was my
projects.
question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Lindley.
Thanks, Mayor. I just had a question about the South Park Pool project, because I know I've heard Councilmember Kennedy and Schaub talk about that, the desire to really get that moving. So can you talk about the timing a little bit more specifically?
No.
Perfect. Thank you.
I can't talk about it with any sort of educated position, but I can. If Kevin's not prepared, I will get information for you about that. But I certainly would. I'd just be blabbering. So
no, that's okay. Thanks.
And I can give you just a little bit because we've been talking about it with the Parks Department. So we are looking in Herd Council that they do want to get this moving. So we're going to be looking at design. That first part of it. We do got to do timing as far as the construction, so we don't lose 2 seasons. With a pool. So kind of that best case is, we'd start early spring of 27, which would put us in the FY 27 budget, but design could happen sooner than that, obviously. So that's kind of rough timeline of what we'd be looking at, and then try not to lose 2 seasons of pool time.
Mr. Kennedy?
Kevin, what you just said is now we're going to design for another design on the South Park Pool, and then instead of just do a design build and get it built?
Well, yeah, and maybe don't separate out those two. If we're looking at a design build, then we go into the design phase of this, you know, the same time frame, but it's going to take a period of time to design it. We haven't had a design done on the pool. We had concept drawings as far as we've ever gotten with it.
Okay, because we spent a lot of money on concept drawings and stuff. And I'd rather not take a lot more money out of the 10 million. I'd like to get it going.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for urban renewal? Nice job, Mr. Zeller. Thank you.
Well, I'm not leaving.
Well, I was just congratulating you for that
Thank you.
last one. I'm reserving judgment on the next.
Okay. Well,
So give us your budget wrap up, sir.
That was the best presentation I've given and intend to give this evening. So let me get that one started. So budget wrap up is exactly that. And I better get this shared so you guys can see it. Again, very similar to the overview. Sarah and I have been taking notes, trying to compile any questions that aren't answered or anything that needs more feedback. You did receive an email from me for those first 2 work sessions. We'll be doing the same for yesterday and this evening. But just to reiterate, the budget for fiscal 27 is based upon $465 million in revenue and spread across those classifications there. And $447 million in expenses. This is driven largely by capital outlay in some very specific areas, which we've highlighted, and I'll mention again. This chart here, since the original overview, actually has been corrected. I mentioned in my email to you on those questions and answers, specifically in special assessments, the FY26 amount, which now is correct, 23.7 million, reflected a significantly larger increase, and that was because I had neglected to include park maintenance districts in the original one, but this is correct. But a $447 million budget for fiscal 27. So those capital projects, some of the major ones, the landfill, cell 6, and leachate pond at the landfill, some transportation projects, one large water project identified, and then you heard from Airport this evening on their planned capital projects, and then again the $10 million for South Park Pool. Those making up the majority of your capital projects for fiscal 27. One correction here from the overview, I had 18. I had not included the billing analyst. That position is in the proposed budget, and I had neglected to include it from my list here. So there are 19 FTEs in the fiscal 27, new FTEs in the fiscal 27 budget. You have heard from all of the departments that have FTE requests. Use this point to remind you, you have not heard from every department. So if there is, again, a burning desire to hear more from or hear from one of those departments, you have very limited time to have that happen. The budget is based upon an assumed decrease in the value of a mill, which is expected to be experienced because of the full implementation of the property tax bill. These are largely based on projections from the Department of Revenue during the legislative session. We're expecting about a 2% reduction in the value of a mill. As a result, the number of mills projected for fiscal year 27 is an increase of 11 mills. None of that will be actually known or acted upon by you until August, when we have final numbers. And you guys will probably see it either at your last meeting in August or first meeting in September. But based upon those assumptions, the increase to the median home is $42 a year, from $857 to $899. That's property taxes and street maintenance district 2. Those are applied across the entire city. Again, you do have some small districts, light maintenance districts, SIDs, PMDs, that some properties belong in, but those are smaller districts and are not citywide. So this is the median home that everybody would pay these. As Public Works mentioned last evening, their budget's based upon some increases in all four utilities, a total of about $4 per month for the average home. Again, reminding them the residential rates were largely held flat in FY26. For the public, you guys are already aware because I'm sure you read it daily. The budget is available online and has been for over almost a month now. Planning on having adoption on June 8th. The council amendment forms, I resent all of the links back to you guys all this evening right before this meeting started, so it should be at the top of your email. If you want to have those included in the council or in the staff memo for council on June 8th, I need them by midnight on May 27th. And then a reminder that tomorrow we have Budget and Finance Committee meeting to discuss committee amendments, the budget resolution, and I think that's about it for me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions for our wrap up, Mr. Boyette?
So Andy, for the last 7 years, I've been asking you, how do you feel about the budget? Are you happy with it? Are you content with it? Will this work? Are you satisfied?
Yeah, I am satisfied. I think as we've discussed, this budget is, well, one, it's balanced. Two, I truly do think the increases are pretty reasonable for the median average property here in Billings. There's a lot of FTE requests this year. That's unique. But we, one, had very few added in the past few years. We've had very limited capability to do so. And we're opening a new water plant, a new rec center, and those take people to run. And so to build facilities and add assets to the city, and think we're going to do that with the same number of people we had in 1950, it's not going to happen. So the city's growing. I think there's capacity to take this on. The only thing that I'll remind you guys, we're planning for that commercial code enforcement officer is only funding that if the tax revenue actually allows for it. That is the plan, and we'll know that in September when we come back to you guys. The rest of them are able to be funded in this budget, and I think move the city forward in a positive way. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Kennedy?
Andy, do we still have all of the positions and all of the new salaries in the on the website?
I assume that has not changed. Yeah.
Has it been updated?
I don't know.
Updated since last fiscal year.
Since last fiscal year.
Nothing. Salaries change July 1 of each year. People take their steps on their anniversary day. So I wouldn't, salaries generally would not have changed, but they will change July 1, and the contracts have them adjusting July 1.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Andy, Councilmember Bory asked about the budget being okay, great. And you and I talked about how this budget, or the last couple budgets, haven't been able to meet the reserves requirement, in a sense that we had to borrow money from ourselves to do that. What do you think this budget will look like as far as having to do that? Are we gonna have to borrow money from ourselves again?
Sure. So for the benefit of the rest of you, Councilmember Neese and I had talked about the general fund reserves and how typically in about December, sometimes in May, right before we receive our tax payments, we go negative cash in the general fund and we have to do internal borrowing. The idea and the goal of the city should be that we're not doing that. We're financially sustainable in every fund to cash flow operations. And we're making progress in the general fund. We used quite a few reserves of our reserves to fund this building as well as to operate last year. The plan long term, and I would say we are making progress, is to use unspent budgeted funds to bolster the reserves to get to a reserve level where we're not doing that. And the reason for doing that, rather than budgeting for addition to reserves, meaning, hey, let's say we're going to bring in $25 million in tax revenue, but we're only going to budget $20 million in expenses, is that's not a popular thing to do, is to budget for additions to reserves. And I understand that. So the discussion and plan has been to use those unspent funds to bolster reserves. And I think this last year, I believe in the month of December, we had to borrow $2 million for 30 days. I'd imagine that we are going to not have that problem in December of 26, or if we do, it'll be less than $1 million. So we're making progress in a positive way.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, that was a good
It wasn't as good as the last one. Thank you.
All right, our agenda shows 2 public comment periods, one right after the other, so I'm going to open it up for the first public comment regarding agenda item 1. Is there any public comment regarding agenda item 1? Seeing none, I'll open it up for public comment on non-agenda items. Anybody out there? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period on non-agenda items. Is there anything else, council? We are adjourned. Thank you.